Welcome to the equity markets. This is your host, Benjamin Sklar, and today's guest is Peter Goldstein, the CEO of Exchange Listing. How you doing, Peter?
Hey, Ben, doing well. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Me as well. So let's kick it off. Please tell me, what is Exchange Listing?
Exchange Listing is a boutique advisory firm, and we work specifically with small cap and micro cap companies focused on their initial public offering. So we work with companies to prepare and educate and execute on their listing, typically on NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, now to include the SIBO, which is a new equity platform for issuers. And we really focus on bringing about all the resources necessary, one, to help educate the CEO, and then to properly execute, prepare, and identify. So that could be working with the investment banking community, working with first-class securities attorneys such as you, Benjamin, and your firm, working with the exchange, really working with the entire ecosystem of the micro cap and small cap universe.
If you could speak with a room full of CEOs right now, what would you tell them on the benefits of taking their companies public?
Listen, there's always the top, which is access to capital and liquidity. And those for small cap and micro cap companies are really transformational in nature. So you have to be committed to wanting to go public. It's not an easy route, as you know, and it's a very challenging, can be very volatile. But the benefits of the ability to attract capital and have that liquidity, and then the third, of course, is that now you have an alternative currency in the way of stock. And utilizing that to be able to attract and reward human capital, which in today's world is becoming more and more important, to be able to have and reward them with stock and stock options.
What do you think are the most common misconceptions that CEOs have about taking their companies public?
That when they get through their IPO, that that they're going to be on easy street, they're going to be able to cash in their stock and go sit on an island and drink a Mai Tai or something. It's quite the opposite, as you know. The hard work becomes actually when you get listed. So the work in getting there is quite a challenge, and there are many unique aspects to being able to affect an IPO. But then being able to manage, run, and build a liquidity event for yourself as an insider is much more challenging than most people really are educated and understand.
What do you think is the most important thing for entrepreneurs to understand about the IPO process?
Well, that's a loaded question. I don't know that there's one particular thing. We can unpack it a little bit. Then, I wrote a book on this topic called The Entrepreneur's IPO. And the idea is to educate entrepreneurs, first of all, that it's even possible to take a small and medium-sized company public. Most people think that you need to be a unicorn, right? So if you go back to the dot-com days and then the dot-com bust, a myth was created around Wall Street that it's too high risk if you're a smaller early stage company. And you and I know that's just not true. So first is to know that it's possible to take a company as an alternative to private equity, as an alternative to venture capital. Going public and accessing institutional capital is a viable option. And people just really, quite honestly, aren't aware and educated that that option exists. Now, there are challenges to that, obviously pros and cons to any one of those choices. And I think the biggest misconception, number one, is that it's possible. Number two is really around the time and the costs. It takes most companies 18, 24 months to properly plan and execute an IPO. And there's a lot of misconception around the cost of that. People think it's millions and millions and millions of dollars. Done right, it's not. And done right is meaning bringing in the right team of professionals, managing your costs, bringing in a group who understands the relevance and the costs associated with planning and executing all the different aspects of a listing. And we work backwards. We start from 2 years out or 18 months out, and then bring it to today and identify all the deficiencies, and then help to start those entrepreneurs and guide them through, working with you as legal, working with the auditors, identifying the gaps, recruiting a board, meeting with the exchange, selecting a banker. Each one of these is a critical area that needs to be executed on properly in order to have the outcome that the investor wants, as well as the entrepreneur.
Right. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that companies face when preparing for an IPO? And how does exchange listing support them in overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, so a lot of it is in the nuances. I've taken my own companies public. 61 now. I was a licensed investment banker. I'm an investor. I've been a board member, a founder, and I've made almost like every mistake possible. And some of them twice. So what we do is we like to be proactive in that, and first look for and identify what could go wrong before it does, and put a solution in place so that mistakes aren't made that are very costly. As an example, if you structure something on your cap table where you bring investors in before the IPO, that could be detrimental to the next round of capital and to the investment banker's ability to want to participate. You know that as a securities lawyer. A lot of entrepreneurs don't seek guidance before they make some kind of critical steps along the pathway. And in each one of these areas, we could identify, certain aspects. So we work to understand, analyze, start with the company story, start with their financial model, and then start with the cap table. Those are the beginning kind of fundamentals for us before we dive into let's rush off to try to get investors and let's rush off to get an investment banker. Build a solid foundation to understand the business, understand the positioning of the business, and understand the key metrics that you're going to use to tell your story, not to the business community, but to the financial community. And I think from your experience, Ben, that positioning yourself when you're talking to an investor is very different than positioning yourself when you're talking to a potential client.
Right. Given your experience, can you highlight some trends or shifts you've seen in the IPO market over the last few years?
Well, last few years have been quite amazing from an educational standpoint, and quite volatile, right? In 2021, we had one of the best IPO cycles we've had in over 20 years. And then the IPO market fell off the cliff. 2022, 2023, and now into 2024, it's one of the worst markets we've had in 30 years. So IPOs are still getting done. They either tend to be very large or very small. There's not a lot of middle market or small cap companies getting done, fundamentally because those companies have been supported by the private equity and the venture capital communities. And those venture capital and private equity are more patient in looking for their liquidity events, and they're waiting for the valuations and for the markets on the IPO side to get a little stronger. There's more capital been sitting on the sidelines now than there has been, certainly forgetting about the last 2 years, probably in the last 2 decades. So access to capital is much, significantly reduced right now, as is the valuations. So you really have to be committed to want to go to market now, because you're not going to raise as much money and you're going to raise it at a lower valuation. But I'm here to tell you, as you know, it's still possible to get it done. And I think one of the bigger challenges then is, what is the type of investor that you're attracting? And there tends to be a lot of faster kind of minded or short money, fast money that's coming into the market these days. And they want liquidity. So they want to know that the stock's going to be able to trade. And unfortunately, if there's downward pressure on the stock and they're not getting the return, they have the ability to sell, and that puts extra pressure on the company and the valuation, and their overall capitalization.
Right. You may have answered this already, but how do you see the IPO market evolving in the future?
I like to think we're going to go back to what's important, which are fundamentals, right? It's not just a race to get liquid. It's really to have a solid base of product market selection and fit, meaning that that whether you're bringing a product or a service, that there's a basis for your company to be able to demonstrate a return to the stakeholders. And I don't just mean the investors. That's your employees, it's your customers, it's the entire community of stakeholders that you have around your business. And then thereby those fundamentals are what's going to carry you forward into the future. And not just necessarily in earnings, but the ability to expand and scale and grow your company with a demonstrable track record.
On a personal front, what are you most excited about in regards to the future of exchange listing?
Well, we started, Ben, it's a sister company called MS Capital. And MS is a Hebrew word for transparency and the truth. So I started MS Capital in 2022 for the purpose of investing in high growth companies that are either going public or are already public and are greatly undervalued and need some short-term capital. So this is typically called bridge capital. And we are democratizing, if you will, bridge capital investing. And meaning that that's typically been done by institutional capital, and that could be hedge fund, could be family office. What we're doing at MS Capital is inviting accredited investors to participate in the fund, which is investing in these companies that are at that emerging growth kind of tipping point, where we're getting in with a very well-crafted financial instrument and giving nice yields and the ability to get some equity participation on the upside. So we're providing much needed capital to unique companies that we're vetting and that we're doing diligence on. We're investing in those companies, and we're giving access to accredited investors to participate.
That's incredible. How do you manage your time wearing both hats?
They're very complementary. A lot of the companies that we're investing in come through the advisory side, and this is boutique. I'll frame it for you. We did actually 5 investments last year. 4 of those were monetized. So our target during the next year will be to invest in about a dozen companies. And so this is really very select, very highly vetted. And on the complementary side, on the advisory piece, is that we like to know management. And so getting to know management, we feel much more comfortable if we're deploying capital and vice versa. In some of the mistakes that I've made on both sides of this was not understanding the timeline and the requirements for deploying that capital, meaning the proper use of proceeds and how long it's going to take me to be able to reach a return for myself, either as the operator and or the investor. And having this market knowledge and market intelligence gives us a higher predictability, which is how I got the returns that I was able to get inside of one of the worst markets in 30 years.
Amazing. When you're thinking about business development and sales and marketing, who is your ideal avatar that you're going after?
Well, we're doing it now. We're talking with, members of the ecosystem, right? You work at a very prominent firm. We do a lot of work with your firm. We have a lot of relationships there, but that goes the same way through the investment banking community. I talk to the exchanges on a regular basis. We're talking to the auditors. It's a group of professionals inside of this ecosystem. And, we've learned those that want to participate and support each other and mostly add value to our clients, right? So, it really is, and I have a lot of respect for what you're doing, which is opening up the community, expanding the community, and working with like-minded, professionals to help support the growth of your clients.
What's your favorite part of the job?
This is a part of it, but I really love working. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in business for myself now in different capacities since my 20s. So I've got 37 years of practice as an entrepreneur, and it's in my DNA. I've been kind of like I always used to joke, like went from diapers to being in business for myself, and so I love working with entrepreneurs. And the reason for me is that I get to see the impact of the work that I'm doing, and the ability to make a difference and to contribute to the path and the trajectory. Entrepreneurs are people that have great vision, they're great risk takers. And, I have the ability then to work with those visionaries and to contribute and add now at this stage, a lot of wisdom, a lot of guidance, and a lot of experience, and a lot of resources.
Can you walk us through a memorable success story of a company that exchange listing took public?
Well, ringing the bell is one of the greatest parts of the IPO journey. I was just recently, Ben, you and I, missed each other. We crossed paths quickly in New York, and I went to a taping with a company that was at NASDAQ to do a follow-on informational piece about their business. And we were with that company's called La Rosa Holdings. And they have a beautiful culture built around family, built around values. They work with the real estate community. And it's great to be able to see the vision. We worked with them for a couple of years. It's actually unique. It's a husband and wife management team, CEO and COO, and to be able to see their vision come to reality, and to see them now at this stage of growth and development where they're taking this culture that they have and bringing it out from a private company into the public markets, and being a part of that, and being at the bell ringing with their group of family and their friends and their brokers and the stakeholders, and just the satisfaction of being able to start something a few years back with a particular goal, and a very volatile. We went through a lot of challenges in getting the deal done because of the current IPO market. And so then now we're on the other side of that. And now we get to be able to take the value of being public and bring that into a company with people that are really dedicated, with a great culture of entrepreneurial mindset.
Love that. Beyond the IPO itself, what advice do you have for companies to maintain momentum and growth in the public markets post listing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of probably the blind spots for most companies, especially in this marketplace. And I think it's really critical to have a 12, 18, 24-month plan post-listing and to be able to have a dedicated budget for awareness, right? Investors don't know about most of these small and micro cap companies the day they start listing. And this would be one of the fallacies I think a lot of entrepreneurs have. They think, oh, I'm going to go to NASDAQ, everybody's going to start buying my stock. Well, it doesn't happen by accident. You really have to work towards educating the consumers, the retail buyers, right, the institutional buyers, the analysts, and to make awareness of your company with material events. So proper communication, steady news flow, and putting your name out in front of investors that can participate and take ownership in the company.
In your experience, what are some red flags that indicate a company might not be ready for an IPO? And how can they be addressed?
Red flags, yellow flags, there's a long list, and I think from a technical perspective, and you see this in your work as a lawyer, financial reporting, you've got to meet your deadlines. And you've got to file your Qs and your Ks along with the pathway of your registration statement. And that takes practice, and it takes internal controls and internal systems. It's mechanical in nature, but when you're now a public reporting company, it's black and white. There's no gray area. You need to report. And so companies often underestimate the human resources, the time, and the information required to give to you to be able to properly file with the SEC on a timely basis. So financial controls and systems, I think, are one of the top aspects of a weakness that can show up for companies, venturing down this road.
Well said. I completely agree with you. Can you discuss any notable challenges or obstacles you've encountered while guiding companies through the IPO process?
Yeah, I mean, one that comes to mind that I think a lot of companies struggle with is the overconfidence of the founder or the CEO. And I'm now when I was younger, I had a similar kind of mindset that I think that I can work and apply myself to overcome challenges without having the ability to then listen and take in the factors of advisors, directors of the marketplace. So overconfidence has hurt a lot of the deals in the sense where they thought they would perform better, they thought that the market would be better receptive to their business and to their model. So that's one of the areas that we look for, is being able to match the assumptions of the company and of the CEO and their overconfidence. Every entrepreneur is confident in their ability to bring their product service to market by nature. That's what an entrepreneur is. I think entrepreneurship drives capitalism, and I'm a big believer in it. I also see the challenge in that. So the way to overcome that is to support the decision making, the presentation of your goals and your assumptions and your forecasts with data, right, with a process, and then to balance out that overconfidence or optimism with data and a systematic way of being able to communicate that to the marketplace.
A few more questions. LinkedIn says you live in Amsterdam. Is that true?
LinkedIn is correct. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm calling in from Amsterdam, so it's 7:30 at night here, and I keep U.S. hours when I'm here, Ben. But I do. I'm actually here's something that you probably don't know about me, is I am a resident of the Netherlands, and I carry a residence card, and I've been living here now part-time for the past 5 years.
Fascinating. I wonder why.
It's a longer story than we have time for today. It originated, I do, prior to exchange listing and working on MS Capital, I've done a fair amount of interim CEO work where I would go in and help to take a company from one point to the next. And it's one of the reasons I love doing what I do, because I've been the operator, I've been on the CEO, and I've been on the, the insider, the founder, the board member, the investor. I've seen kind of 360 degrees of what it looks like. And from experience as an operator was what brought me to Amsterdam. Then this thing called COVID came, which you might have heard of. It was a bit of a game changer for all of us. That's not what's kept me here, but that's what originally brought me here.
Makes sense. All right, two more questions. For the entrepreneurs listening, what is the most important piece of advice you have for them on how to think about the IPO process and equity fundraising?
So you will increase the value of your company just by planning for your exit of an IPO, even if you never get there. The process and the discipline of having financial reporting, of building your team, of the legal structuring, the capital structuring, the governance, right, and the diligence that goes with all that will increase, I would say, exponentially when you're ready for whether that's an IPO or some other form of an exit. IPO is not the only way of getting liquidity. It could be M&A, right? It could be a trade sale. It could be something that you're just planning down for the future. So I think operating and running your private company as if you were headed towards an IPO is a great value proposition just by itself. And do not underestimate the time, the energy, and the resources required to properly run your company as if it was public. And just think about it. If you were doing anything else in life, you practice, you practice, you practice until you feel like you've got expertise in your area, and then you would go to the next level. And going down the public route is no different. So building that team, building the internal systems and controls, and practicing that for the outcome of either an eventual IPO or just increasing the quality and the management of your day-to-day operations.
That's fantastic advice. All right, Peter. So my last question, signature question. If there was one thing you could do to improve this world, what would you do and why?
It comes to mind as, love and happiness, right? It's like, it's kind of cliche, but I think if people were just really more loving and genuine and open, and that would then bring about, a happier kind of place to be and to live and to help and support and work with others. I find just amazing how people's ego and agendas can get in the way of, accomplishing great things together. So it's maybe a little philosophical, maybe a little cliche, but I just as simple today as walking down the street and I smiled at somebody and they smiled back, and there were no words. It was a total stranger. A moment of happiness and an appreciation for humanity really seemed to change the impact and the trajectory of just that one little exchange.
That's beautiful. I'm into that. Thank you so much, Peter, for hopping on the show today. I've been following you for years through LinkedIn. I see you as a true leader in the space. Everybody knows you, and I'm excited to work with you for the decades to come.
Ben, I appreciate it. It's great to spend time connecting. And for those that are listening, please feel free to reach out. It's important to me to add value to the community, and as well to anything I can do. People want to get a hold of my book, just DM me directly as a listener of your show. We'll give you an electronic copy for free, or they can buy it on Amazon. That's there for. But more importantly, if there are entrepreneurs and others who just look at me as a resource, and if I can help to guide and add some value along the way, great. If that becomes something different in the way of business together, also open to that. But the offer is really genuinely there to help to provide value and contribute to the entrepreneurial community.
Thank you so much, Peter. I wish you all the
best. Thanks for having me, Ben. Yeah, cheers.